began on a quiet night somewhere above the South China Sea. At 1:19 a.m., a calm voice from the cockpit said 5 simple words: "Good night, Malaysian 370." No one knew it would become the most haunting phrase in modern aviation. Minutes later, the radar screen flickered and the signal was gone. A Boeing 777 carrying 239 people had vanished without a sound. There was no distress call, no explosion, no trace of wreckage in the sky, only silence, stretching across the ocean and into history. For years, experts searched for logic inside the chaos. Governments sent ships, satellites, and submarines, yet the mystery only grew deeper. Every answer led to another question, every theory to another dead end. It was as if the sea itself had chosen to hide the truth. But after more than a decade, new discoveries have started to surface. Could technology finally reveal what happened after those 5 quiet words? It was just after midnight at Kuala Lumpur International Airport, the air thick with humidity and the faint sound of jet engines humming in the distance. Inside the terminal, passengers waited sleepily, unaware that they were about to board a flight that would change history. Malaysia Airlines Flight 370, a routine red-eye bound for Beijing, was scheduled to take off at 12:41 a.m. and land 6 hours later. There was nothing unusual about that night. On board were 239 people from 14 different countries: business travelers, students, honeymooners, and families heading home. Among them were 2 passengers carrying stolen passports, a detail that would later send investigators chasing false leads about terrorism. But in reality, they were just migrants trying to reach Europe. Everything seemed calm. The crew prepared the plane, passengers took their seats, and at 12:41 a.m., the Boeing 777 lifted off into the dark sky. At the controls sat 2 men who would soon become the center of one of the greatest mysteries in modern aviation. Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah was 53, a veteran with more than 18,000 hours of flight experience. Beside him was his young co-pilot, Fariq Abdul Hamid, just 27, flying his first Boeing 777 without supervision. Both men sounded relaxed and professional as they guided the aircraft northward over the South China Sea. When air traffic control instructed them to switch frequencies, the response came smooth and calm. "Good night, Malaysian 370.
Good night, Malaysian 370.
Moments later, the plane crossed the boundary of radar coverage and disappeared. What could cause a massive aircraft to vanish from the sky without a single distress call?
After more than 4 years, has it not been found?
At 1:21 a.m., only 7 minutes after that calm exchange with air traffic control, Flight MH370 vanished from civilian radar. Controllers in Kuala Lumpur expected the aircraft to appear on Vietnamese screens, but it never did. The signal blinked once, then disappeared. The transponder, which sends a plane's position and altitude, went silent. At first, it seemed like a routine malfunction. But as the minutes stretched into half an hour, the silence became impossible to ignore. No one knew it yet, but one of the most advanced aircraft in the world had just disappeared. Inside the control room, confusion quickly turned to alarm. Controllers tried calling the crew through multiple frequencies. No response. By 1:38 a.m., Ho Chi Minh City confirmed they had also lost contact. Later records showed no distress call, no emergency code, and no message of any kind. The Boeing 777 had simply vanished into the darkness without a sound. Hours later, military radar data revealed something that changed everything. The plane hadn't crashed in the South China Sea as first assumed. It had turned back toward Malaysia, crossing the peninsula before heading west over the Andaman Sea. This wasn't a mechanical failure or navigational mistake. The turn was sharp and deliberate, done by someone with full control of the cockpit. Every communication system had been switched off one by one, leaving the aircraft invisible to civilians but still faintly visible to military radar. When news broke that a passenger jet had vanished, the world was stunned. Families gathered at airports in Kuala Lumpur and Beijing, waiting for news that never came. Governments launched ships and aircraft into the South China Sea, scanning every possible route. Each hour brought new rumors: an oil slick, a floating object, a radar echo. Each one ended in disappointment. By the next day, investigators realized the search was happening in the wrong ocean. Once Malaysia confirmed the radar data, the entire investigation shifted direction. This was no accident. The person at the controls had taken the plane far off course. The deliberate actions pointed to an insider, someone who knew how to make a jet vanish from the grid. The aircraft continued flying northwest, past Penang Island, then south toward open water until it disappeared again, this time beyond every known tracking system. In the following days, experts examined every possible scenario. Could a fire have disabled communications but left the plane flying? Could a sudden loss of pressure have knocked everyone unconscious? None of these ideas fit the data. The systems hadn't failed on their own. They were intentionally turned off. Whoever was in control had made a series of precise decisions to keep the flight hidden for as long as possible. By dawn, rescue teams from 5 countries were searching the South China Sea and the Gulf of Thailand. Planes flew in tight grids, ships scanned the waves with sonar, and satellites tracked the smallest movements from above. But there was nothing. The skies were clear, the ocean calm, and no wreckage was found. It was as if the sea itself had erased the evidence. At Beijing Capital Airport, relatives of passengers waited through the morning, still hoping to see Flight 370 land. The arrival board kept showing delayed hours passed before officials quietly escorted families into a private room. That was when the truth began to settle in that the plane was not delayed. It was gone. Within a single day, the largest and most expensive search operation in aviation history was underway. From that night forward, MH370 became more than a missing aircraft. It became a symbol of how fragile modern certainty can be. The disappearance challenged everything people thought they knew about technology and control. Investigators were determined to find out what had happened during those 7 silent minutes and the long flight that followed. Yet each new clue only deepened the mystery. What could drive a pilot or anyone to erase a plane so completely that even the ocean refused to give it back? When investigators learned the plane's disappearance had been deliberate, their focus turned to the 2 men in the cockpit. Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah and First Officer Fariq Abdul Hamid were the only people with direct control of MH370. Every mystery of that night began with them. Captain Zahari was 53, one of Malaysia Airlines' most respected pilots. With over 18,000 hours of flying experience, including 8,000 on the Boeing 777, he was known for his composure and precision. Colleagues described him as calm and dependable, a man who loved flying. Yet behind that image, his personal life was falling apart. His marriage had broken down, his wife had moved out, and relatives said he had grown distant. He spent long nights alone in his study, using a flight simulator he had built himself. It seemed like a simple hobby, but later investigators found something unsettling inside the computer. A route ending deep in the southern Indian Ocean, strikingly similar to MH370's final path. Beside him that night sat First Officer Fariq Abdul Hamid, 27 years old and full of optimism. It was his first unsupervised flight on the Boeing 777, a milestone for any young pilot. Farik had joined the airline straight out of flight school and was known for his discipline and friendly nature. He was engaged to another pilot, proud of his career and admired by colleagues. 2 weeks before the flight, he appeared in a CNN documentary about aviation training. On camera, he looked confident and calm, a promising young aviator at the start of a bright future. The contrast between the two men intrigued investigators. Zaharie was nearing the end of his career, burdened by personal troubles and political frustration. Farik was just beginning, cheerful and ambitious. Their partnership seemed routine, one experienced mentor guiding a young pilot, but something about that flight broke the pattern. When the transponder was switched off, it was done manually, not by accident. The turn across Malaysia was precise and controlled, planned by someone who knew the aircraft inside out. Whoever made those choices understood how to make a jet vanish. Reporters soon uncovered more about Zaharie's private life. His social media showed public messages to young women, some barely 18. He also supported opposition leader Anwar Ibrahim, who had been convicted of sodomy hours before MH370 took off, a case widely viewed as political. Friends said the verdict had left him depressed and angry. While investigators never proved any link between these events and the disappearance, the timing raised suspicion. Still, the technical precision of the maneuver stunned experts. To disable multiple systems, navigate through overlapping airspaces, and avoid detection for hours required patience and skill. There was no evidence of struggle, no emergency, no sign of panic. Whoever controlled the aircraft stayed calm and methodical, as if executing a plan. For the families, that idea was unbearable. If Zaharie had done it, the tragedy was intentional. If someone else had seized control, the truth was even darker. Either way, the answers lay in that sealed cockpit, now resting somewhere beneath 6 kilometers of ocean. When data from Zaharie's home simulator was retrieved, it showed flight paths toward the same remote region where investigators believed the plane had ended. There was no suicide note or clear motive, only patterns too deliberate to dismiss. Some experts became convinced that Zaharie had rehearsed his final flight. Others defended him, saying the simulator data could have been random practice. The official report avoided blame, stating only that the route was manually altered by someone with aviation knowledge. In the end, the picture that emerged was chilling. Every move, from the radio silence to the sharp turn west, pointed to a pilot's hand. Calm, skilled, and unhurried. Whoever was flying MH370 wanted it to disappear and succeeded. As investigators began tracing the aircraft's path across open water, one question remained. If the truth was not inside the cockpit, where else could it be hiding? By sunrise on March 8, 2014, the search for Flight MH370 had already begun. At first, authorities believed the aircraft had gone down in the South China Sea, the area where its signal had last appeared. Malaysia deployed search planes, while Vietnam, China, and the United States sent ships to join the mission. For hours, they scanned empty waters under clear skies, expecting to see debris or an oil slick. But the ocean remained silent. No wreckage, no distress signal, no trace of life. As time passed, confusion turned to disbelief. Radar operators replayed data, trying to understand how a Boeing 777 could simply vanish. Then, a new discovery changed everything. Malaysia's military radar, which still tracked the skies long after civilian contact was lost, had recorded something unusual. The plane had turned back. Instead of continuing toward Beijing, MH370 had crossed the Malay Peninsula and flown west over the Andaman Sea. This was no accident. The turn required manual input, proving someone in the cockpit was still in control. The news shocked the world. For more than an hour after it vanished from civilian radar, the aircraft had flown undetected through national airspace. It passed close to Penang Island before heading into the open ocean. The realization was chilling. MH370 hadn't crashed early, it had kept flying. Families who had spent the night praying for survivors now faced a darker reality. Someone had deliberately taken the plane off course. Within 24 hours, the entire search operation shifted. The South China Sea was abandoned as ships and aircraft redeployed toward the Indian Ocean. The new target area was massive, stretching across some of the most isolated waters on Earth. It was a place so deep that the ocean floor lay 6 kilometers below the surface. Inmarsat, a British satellite company, offered the next breakthrough. Their system had received hourly handshakes from MH370 automatic pings, showing the plane was still airborne for nearly 7 more hours. Though the data revealed no coordinates, it drew a faint curve on the map pointing south. Using Doppler analysis, scientists calculated the most likely path based on shifts in the radio signals. The results suggested the plane had ended its journey somewhere in the remote southern Indian Ocean, far from any shipping routes. It was a place where no one would see it fall. Over the next 3 years, the Australian Transport Safety Bureau led a massive underwater search. Using sonar and autonomous underwater vehicles, they mapped more than 120,000 square kilometers of seabed, an area larger than England. The effort cost over $200 million and uncovered shipwrecks, mountains, and trenches, but not a single piece of the Boeing 777. By early 2017, the official search was suspended. Still, not everyone was ready to stop. In 2018, a private company named Ocean Infinity took over under a no-find, no-fee contract. Their advanced drones combed another 112,000 square kilometers with improved sonar and cameras. Month after month, the results were the same. The sea seemed determined to guard its secret. For the families of 239 passengers, every day without answers felt like a new loss. Many refused to believe the story had ended. Memorials were held each March, but closure never came. 11 years later, the mystery endures. MH370 remains one of the greatest unsolved disappearances in modern history, a reminder of how fragile human certainty can be, even in an age of satellites and endless data. And yet, deep beneath the water, search teams believe the truth is still there. Somewhere in the darkness, buried under pressure and time, lies the evidence of what really happened. The question now is not whether the plane will be found, but when the ocean will finally decide to give it back. A year after MH370 vanished, the ocean finally spoke. On July 29, 2015, a man walking along a quiet beach on Réunion Island, a small French territory east of Madagascar, noticed a large piece of metal half buried in the sand. It was covered in barnacles and worn smooth by the sea, but the shape was unmistakable. Investigators quickly identified it as a flapper on a movable part of a Boeing 777's wing. For the first time since that night, the world had physical proof that MH370 had ended its journey in the Indian Ocean. The discovery reignited hope and grief in equal measure. French authorities confirmed the serial numbers matched MH370, and debris testing began immediately. Within weeks, more fragments appeared across the western Indian Ocean. A horizontal stabilizer in Mozambique, a wing flap in Tanzania, pieces of interior panels and cabin parts in Mauritius and South Africa. Each item told the same story. The plane had broken apart on impact, and ocean currents had carried its remains thousands of miles westward. Scientists studied the barnacles attached to the flaperon, hoping to learn how long it had drifted. The organism's growth patterns showed that the wreckage had floated for more than a year, traveling through powerful ocean currents before reaching land. Yet, the data couldn't reveal one crucial detail: the exact crash site. The Indian Ocean is vast and unpredictable, and even the best drift models could only estimate a general area. The fragments were clues, but not answers. For the families, these discoveries brought painful closure. They had spent a year living in uncertainty, clinging to rumors and theories. Now they had proof that their loved ones were gone, but not the peace that comes with knowing why. Many gathered for memorials, holding photos and candles, while others demanded that the search resume. But the official response was slow, tangled in politics and cost. Governments argued over funding, while private experts worked quietly to analyze the debris. Among those experts was an Australian oceanographer named Dr. Vincent Line. In 2024, he announced that he had identified what he called a bright pixel anomaly on seafloor maps near Broken Ridge, a massive underwater plateau west of Australia. Using global bathymetric data, Line found a small, unusually reflective point around 33 degrees south, 100.27 degrees east, roughly 1,500 kilometers from Perth. He believed this was the resting place of MH370. According to Line, the location wasn't random. It aligned almost perfectly with a longitude line passing through Penang, the hometown of Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah. To him, this suggested the pilot had chosen the site deliberately, aiming for a place so remote and deep that the wreckage would never be found. While Line's theory drew attention, another researcher, British aerospace engineer Richard Godfrey, approached the mystery from a different angle. He studied data from global amateur radio networks, thousands of weak signals that bounce around the atmosphere every second. When a large object like an aircraft passes through, it creates subtle disturbances. By analyzing these disturbances from March 8, 2014, Godfrey mapped 160 possible detection points, reconstructing MH370's path from takeoff to its final descent. His findings revealed something no one expected: a 20-minute holding pattern over the Indian Ocean, as if the plane had circled before vanishing. Both theories offered new possibilities, but neither could be proven without the wreckage. Some experts saw hope in the data, while others warned against reading too much into patterns that might be coincidence. Still, these discoveries reignited global interest in the case and gave the search new direction. By 2025, Ocean Infinity had returned to the ocean once more, scanning deeper trenches around Broken Ridge. Families watched with cautious optimism, aware that time was running out but unwilling to give up. The search had become more than a mission to find a plane. It was a promise to uncover the truth. And deep beneath the waves, amid cold darkness and crushing pressure, something waited to be found. What would happen if those coordinates finally led to MH370's resting place? The next chapter of the search was about to reveal whether the ocean had been hiding its secret or protecting it. By 2024, most people had accepted that MH370 might never be found. Governments had ended their official searches, funding had dried up, and even some families had begun to lose hope. But then, deep within the scientific community, two men revived the mystery. Each came from a different field, yet both claimed to have uncovered evidence that could finally reveal where the aircraft had gone. The first was Dr. Vincent Line, an oceanographer from the University of Tasmania. Line had spent decades studying seafloor topography, analyzing how water currents and geological formations shape the Indian Ocean. While reviewing global bathymetric maps, he noticed something strange. a single bright pixel on satellite data near a place called Broken Ridge, roughly 1,500 kilometers west of Perth. Its coordinates, 33 degrees south and 100.27 degrees east, didn't match any known geological feature. To Line, it looked man-made. He called it a bright pixel anomaly, a term that would soon ripple through online aviation circles. Line believed the object rested about 6,000 meters below the surface in a deep trench surrounded by steep underwater cliffs. He theorized that this depression, which he nicknamed the Penang Longitude Deep Hole, could have trapped the wreckage, preventing debris from spreading across the ocean. What made his idea even more unsettling was its alignment. The longitude line of the anomaly intersected directly with the runway of Penang Airport, the hometown of Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah. To Line, this was not coincidence but intention. He suggested the captain had chosen the location deliberately, steering MH370 toward the most remote and undetectable spot on Earth. According to Line, the deep trench acted as both a tomb and a hiding place. The wreckage could have slipped into the pit's shadow, invisible to sonar and radar. It explained why thousands of square kilometers had been searched in vain. When he published his findings online, reactions were instant and polarizing. Some oceanographers praised his approach, saying it aligned with known drift patterns and geological data. Others dismissed it as speculation, arguing that a single bright pixel might simply be an error or noise in the mapping process. Line didn't back down. He claimed the anomaly appeared consistently across multiple datasets, insisting it was too precise to be a glitch. While Line focused on the ocean floor, another scientist turned his gaze to the sky. Richard Godfrey, a retired British aerospace engineer and physicist, had been quietly working on a different kind of data, the radio waves that constantly bounce around the planet. Amateur ham radio operators transmit signals 24 hours a day, creating a global web of electromagnetic echoes. When a large object passes through these signals, it disturbs them, leaving tiny ripples in the data. Godfrey analyzed those ripples from March 8, 2014, and what he found was extraordinary. By studying thousands of weak disturbances recorded by global receivers, he mapped 160 separate detection points, each one corresponding to a moment when MH370 had likely crossed a signal path. From these fragments of invisible noise, he reconstructed a possible flight path stretching from Malaysia to the southern Indian Ocean. The results matched the satellite data almost perfectly. But there was one more detail. According to Godfrey's reconstruction, MH370 didn't fly in a straight line. 3 hours into the journey, it entered a holding pattern over the ocean, circling for about 20 minutes before continuing south. No one knew why. Was it a system check, a sign of hesitation, or a final act of calculation? Whatever the reason, that strange pause added a chilling dimension to the mystery. When Line and Godfrey's work became public, analysts were divided. Some hailed their methods as groundbreaking, blending oceanography and radio science to uncover new clues. Others called them coincidences shaped by wishful thinking. Without the wreckage, neither theory could be proven. Yet both shared one haunting idea that MH370 hadn't simply vanished. It was still out there, hidden in the deep, waiting for someone to look in the right place. If both men are right, then perhaps MH370 was never lost at all. It may have been waiting to be found all along. 11 years have passed since Flight MH370 vanished, taking 239 souls and one unanswered question with it. Across the world, families still gather each March, lighting candles and whispering the same final words that echoed through the night sky. Good night, Malaysian 370. Those words have become a symbol of loss, but also of endurance. Aviation has changed because of this tragedy. Planes are now tracked in real time. black boxes transmit stronger signals. No aircraft will ever be allowed to disappear without a trace again. Yet, even with all these advancements, the mystery remains untouched, resting somewhere beneath 6 kilometers of silence. The ocean remembers what it took. Its secrets endure, waiting for the day someone finally finds them. Do you believe MH370 will ever be found? Tell us what you think in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more hidden stories the world almost forgot.